This, in my opinion, is the best effects plugin for ambience. This is a famous drum kit that a lot of you probably know about that perfectly matches these types of beats. This is something that I strongly recommend that you do with a lot of your loops. Aight, what's good YouTube? In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over how ICYTWAT makes his signature ambient retro-synth melodies. This tutorial is going to be broken down into 5 parts. First, I'm going to be going over the best presets, banks, and VSTs to use, how he creates chord progressions and melodies, how he creates his drum patterns, as well as 2 beats that I made which incorporate everything that I'm going to talk about in this video. Also, if you want any of the drum sounds or samples that are used in this tutorial, there's a link in the description where you can download them completely free. Also, make sure to follow my Instagram at FinnaFinesse. When I get those numbers up, I'm going to start doing giveaways for my private drum kits as well as sample packs that I'm working on, so make sure to go follow that. But anyway, let's get into the tutorial. So ICYTWAT's style has consistently revolved around ambience as well as synthetics. Most recently, his style has consisted of a more retro vibe, and the reason for this is that recently he's been using a lot of samples and old analog drum kits. So that's stuff that I don't really want to cover in this tutorial because it's stuff that you can't really do in FL Studio. So instead, I'm mainly going to go over the types of beats he made back in 2017, which was when he really started to blow up as a producer. So let's talk about the best sounds and VSTs to use. So ICYTWAT's beats are the equivalent to what you'd get if you were to combine synthwave and trap beats. Similar to synthwave, for his types of beats, you want to stick to pads, arps, key sounds, mainly pianos, and in some cases leads, as I'll show you later. The best VSTs to get these sounds are from Omnisphere for arps, Purity for synth layers only, Electra X for pad sweeps as well as arps, and Nexus for literally everything. He blew up in 2017, so at the time, almost every beat he made was incorporating Nexus in some way, and there's a reason for that. These types of beats, due to their simplicity within the chord progression and the drum patterns, require a lot of layers and complex sounds that sit in the background to really make them stand out and be unique. As for ICYTWAT, this is why his beats have such a unique sound to them. Simple melodies, but lots of layers. As for Nexus, almost every preset in there is comprised of 2 to 4 pre-layered sounds, and all of them are already mixed with reverbs, delays, and filters, which, as I'm going to show you, are 3 effects that he uses in a lot of his beats. So let's talk about creating the melody. Similar to what I said in the Pure tutorial, these beats are mainly made up of simple chord progressions that only use up to 4 chords, in most cases 2, and these progressions usually just have 1 lead that plays on top of them. The big difference though is with Pierre, I talked a lot about how he uses dry and tightly EQ'd sounds in his beats, but for ICYTWAT you want to do the opposite. You actually want to use sounds with reverbs and lots of delays that don't have too many EQs on them, and the reason he can specifically get away with this is his beats honestly are more like songs, in the sense that they don't really leave space for the artist because they're using high reverb and high delay sounds. He also really doesn't cut the low ends as much as normal producers would. His drums don't really sit above the melody, and he uses an excessive amount of stereo in his sounds. And if you listen to his beats, a lot of his chords and melodies that are playing are done by hand because you can hear that the velocity is being tweaked with. And if you're like myself and you can't really play keys like this, what you can do to compensate for that is go into FL Studio, you can highlight your MIDI and you can hit Alt-R, and there's a knob down here for levels where you can just tweak with the velocity. Then what you can do is just manually play the melody to yourself, and you can tweak with the velocities depending on how you want to. So with that being said, I'm going to break down a melody that I made keeping this all in mind. I laid down the simple 2-chord progression with a simple lead that plays in the second part. It's just a simple 5-note 2-chord progression that repeats constantly, and it sounds like this. And then what I did to give it more stereo is I right clicked it in the pattern block, I hit clone, and then I created another one, copied the exact same melody over, and I just panned one to the left and one to the right to give it more stereo overall. And then I added a bunch of low pass and high pass filters on the melody to cut out just a little bit of the lows and highs. Then I went into Omnisphere and copy and pasted the same lead that plays in that chord progression, and I found this ambient key preset that perfectly matches the vibe that we're looking for, soft ambient keys with a lot of reverb. I added halftime as well as this reverb, as well as a filter and an EQ just to cut out the highs a little bit. So now it sounds like this. So then I took this pad preset that I use a lot from Purity and the slow synth bank called Analog Pad, and then I create simple stabs out of the same chord progression that we used in the original melody, and it sounds like this. And for effects, I add this chorus plugin just to give it more stereo, as well as an EQ to cut out the highs. Then I took this bell preset out of the Fantasy and Dream expansion pack, one which he uses a lot, and I took this bell preset called BL Dream Bell, and it sounds like this. Then I took this preset pad, also out of Nexus, called PD Lost Temple, and I played similar stabs to the Purity preset that just sit over all the chords. That sounds like this. As for effects, I just add this imager from Waves that'll just make it wider, as well as a basic cathedral reverb. Finally, the last sound that I added was this really weird ARP preset that I found in Omnisphere called Plucking the Music Box ARP. I removed one of the bell layers, and I just copy and pasted the exact same chords from the very first melody that we played, and it sounds like this. And as for effects, I add this plugin called Echo Boy. This, in my opinion, is the best effects plugin for ambience. It's basically a delay and reverb combined into one to give you like an echo cave effect. But that's it for the melody. So with all these sounds playing together, it now sounds like this. So let's move on to drums. So like I said in the Wheezy tutorial, the vibes that we get from our beat need to be reflected in the drum patterns that we make. So this beat is really ambient, relaxing, so we don't want to overdo it like. So as for the types of drum sounds he uses, generally the only thing that sticks out is one. He doesn't really use claps, he mainly just sticks to punchy snares, and in some cases rim shots. And he also doesn't ever use the stubby, short, distorted 808s like the Zay and Wheezy 808 that most people are using nowadays. He instead sticks to very dry and long 808s such as the Lex 808. He'll also tend to have an open hat, perk, or some weird Vox sample that just plays every 4 bars. Something that just gives it more uniqueness and a general 4-step rhythm. As for drum kits and drum sounds, he's been using a lot of experimental stuff, but back when he was blowing up in 2017 with these style of beats, his go-to drum kit was the SNRLX Jug Kit. This is a famous drum kit that a lot of you probably know about that perfectly matches these types of beats. Yeah, but anyway, I really just used this kit for the beat. I laid down a simple snare as well as a basic 808 pattern that sounds like this. Then I created this basic hi-hat pattern. I just gave it a little bit of reverb and I turned down the mix while playing the entire beat with the hi-hats to the point where you could barely notice it, but it's still there. And that sounds like this. Then I add these simple 4-step open hats like we were talking about. They also have the same reverb as the hi-hats, and they sound like this. They also have a slight delay and filter on them to make them sit in the background a little bit more. And then finally, I just add this basic kick pattern, same as the 808 with a few extra kicks that just come in at the end, and it sounds like this. So all of these sounds played together now sounds like this. Yeah, so that's it for this beat. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is go over this other beat that I made that also follows a similar style of ICYTWAT. I'm not going to break the entire thing down, mainly because everything that I already talked about in the last beat goes for this one as well. I just want to talk about the sample that I used in it. It's a piano from Looperman that I found, which perfectly matches these types of beats. It's played by hand, which like I mentioned, most of ICYTWAT's beats are, and it has a simple 3-chord progression. It sounds like this. So that's cool on its own, but it sounds like it's missing something. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna layer a bunch of sounds on top of that original progression. This is something that I strongly recommend that you do with a lot of your loops. You want to open FL Keys, loop the sample as a pattern block in the playlist, and basically just go over by ear and remake the sample as best as you can. I went ahead and did this, and the keys I copied sounds like this. So that doesn't sound perfect, but sounds identical enough to the point where we can just open various plugins and now copy and paste that exact same progression and add a bunch of layers that'll play on top of the melody to give it more unique sound. So in doing that, I went into various plugins and I just copy and pasted the same melody with various sounds and a few ARPs to give it a more synthetic vibe. I'm not going to go over all of them, but the one thing I do want to talk about is the Electra X libraries that I used. Most people forget that Electra X is originally a synth, more for the EDM and synthwave type music. It was really just adopted in the trap scene as a trap plugin. So with that in mind, for these types of beats, I strongly recommend that you go through the original libraries that Electra X gives you. Specifically, I recommend that you go through the action sequence and ARP multiplier banks. There you'll usually find the best sounds for these types of beats. And finally, I add this lead that plays in the pre-chorus from Expand 2 called Whiner in the soft leads pack. When I said you can use leads in the beginning of the video, what I meant was that sure you can use them, but the problem is most lead sounds have really sharp frequencies in them, which doesn't really match the relaxing vibe that we're going through with these beats. So if you're gonna have a lead play at any point in the beat, I strongly recommend using this library, as most of the presets in here are really soft sine sounds. Also, the notes that I played for the lead all overlap with the chords being played throughout the beat, which is another reason to why copying it in the MIDI is so useful. So that's what I did with the melody, and everything combined sounds like this. Apart from that, there's not really much to go over with this beat. Drums are super basic and there's no crazy effects. Everything is just slightly filtered and EQ'd sounds with a little bit of reverb, chorus, and filters, as well as a little bit of RC20 just to give it that old school vibe that you hear in its most recent beats. Yeah, but that's going to be it for the tutorial. I'm going to play the full beat at the end so you can listen to it. And once again, make sure to follow my Instagram at FinnaFinesse. Once I reach, let's say 250 followers, I'm going to start doing various giveaways of my drum kits for free, as well as other stuff. Let me know what topics you want me to cover in the description. Suicide Boys is coming next. It was actually supposed to be for this video, but I needed a little bit more time to make it, so expect that. Let me know what you thought. Any suggestions, let me know. Make sure to like, subscribe, and peace.